Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Sólás Starlight watch prototype. First off, let's go on ahead and throw this guy down. This is a prototype watch that was provided to me directly by the maker, by the guy who's behind the Sólás watch company. And we have to assume as a result that this is the very best quality controlled prototype ever, that this has been regulated to within an inch of its life, and that I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature of my review, but nonetheless, there's that. A further disclaimer is that this guy is a prototype because this is a watch that's going to be funded on Kickstarter. I generally don't do this. I generally don't review prototypes. I generally don't, talk about Kickstarters because very often they tend to be a little bit sketchy and very often they tend to be uninteresting. There's not enough there to make me do that. But this was a case in which there were enough interesting things going on that I figured it was worth my taking a look, and because I think it's pretty unique, it's pretty interesting, and it's pretty different. So generally speaking, I avoid these, but this one was fascinating enough for me to do that. Next thing, let's do a little bit of size measurement on this guy. We're doing this in millimeters because that's the way the watch world works. The overall size, excluding the crown, comes in right around 38 millimeters here. With the crown, comes up to about 40. The lug-to-lug distance, which is very important for wearability for smaller wrists, is quite petite, actually. We're coming in here around 43, 44 millimeters. The lug width on this guy, I want to say, is 20 millimeters exactly, which is good. And then the thickness on this is very, very thin. We can put this down here and we see around 10 millimeters here. Very, very thin. So I appreciate the size of this very much. It wears nicely on the wrist here. I'll put it on my 6.75-inch wrist, and we will see that it is relatively small. So, yeah, right there. Wears nicely on a relatively small wrist. So, there you go. Let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of the Sólás Starlight watch right here. So first off, on the good side, this guy is using a deployant style clasp. What we see here is that there is a clasp here and that it actually goes in this way. And that's great. Not only because it means there's going to be less wear and tear on your strap because you're not tucking it in and out every time, but it also means there's not a tongue hanging out here. One of the things I really dislike about deployant clasps for watch straps is that very often they've got the ahegao tongue hanging out at the back of them there. It doesn't do a damn thing for me. So I'm a big fan of the having the tongue tucked up inside of this guy so that it provides both a little bit of padding on top of the clasp as well as getting out of your way. This is exactly how a deployant strap should be done on a strapped watch, and I love seeing it done well here. This is a good deployant clasp. That's excellent, and it's even engraved with the company name, which is itself a beautiful thing. So that's good. Next thing, the size on this is quite nice. It's a very unassuming size. It could very easily work on a lot of different wrists. This could be worn very easily as a lady's watch, and not that there's really gender to watches, but this could fit any wrist, including mine. So that's a beautiful thing. It's also a very thin watch. Very often these days watches are thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker. This guy comes across as very thin. If we put it up against the Seiko Alpinist here, yeah, this comes across as very thin, and so I appreciate that very much. It's also got a sapphire crystal both on the front of it as well as on the back of it. We'll get there in a second, but that's a beautiful thing. I love sapphire, and seeing it at this kind of a price point, that's great. Next thing, this guy is a watch that actually has Irish on it, like the Irish language, Gaelic. And so we can see the name of the company is Irish, and then down here we have the Gaelic for designed in Ireland, which in my original take I mistranslated. So, that's fixed now. And then actually on the back of it here, I'll actually pop the deployant clasp out of the way so we can see the back of the watch nicely. What we see here is around the outside there, we have Sólás Starlight, we have 5 Atmosphere, we have a crystal sapphire, or sapphire crystal, written in your Irish there. And then I actually had to look this up, and this means limited edition number 1. And so, because this is a prototype, that's the very first thing there. So, as a result, this is a watch that actually includes the Irish language, which I kind of dig, right? They're really going all in on the Irishness of this thing. And you know what? That's kind of a cool thing. So there's that. Next thing, the movement. Now, the movement of this is unusual. The movement of this is unusual in a bunch of different ways, partly because of the decoration. This is a very nicely decorated movement, but it's also a micro-rotor movement. What I mean by that is this is an automatic watch. This little weight spins around, and as it spins, it winds the watch. And in fact, it did wind the watch as I was wearing this guy. But it has a rotor. Most automatic watches have a big rotor in the back there that cover a large part of the movement. Like this guy right here, this is a micro rotor. And that's cool. That's really cool. The fact that this is a micro rotor, that's usually a complication that's found on very high-end pieces. The fact that we're able to get this at this kind of a price point is very impressive. Coupled with the finishing, the logo, and everything like that, this is kind of cool looking. And it is an automatic movement. It's the movement itself is called the Hangzhou. I'm sorry, my Chinese isn't good either. And it's the 5000A. It is an automatic. It's got a 42+ hour power reserve. The accuracy spec here is plus or minus 20 seconds, which isn't great, but at the same time, this guy ran really accurate. I put this guy up on the time grapher, and positions averaged out to about -3 seconds a day. The most deviation was -9 in the face down position, but most of them were very close to 0. I'm assuming that this one was regulated to within an inch of its existence, but at the same time, it's capable. And, I've been wearing it, so it's not, it's a thing. So that's great. Next thing, this is a non-hacking movement. What I mean by that is that when I pull the crown all the way out here, the second hand does not stop. That means you can't adjust the seconds to perfect accuracy, but there aren't even second markers on here, so it's not the end of any worlds there. It is a 28,800 beat per hour movement, which is good, and this is the very first time, actually, that this movement has been used in a production watch, at least according to the founder of the Kickstarter there. So that's kind of cool and a little bit unique. So most people haven't really ever seen a micro rotor movement, and the fact that you could potentially purchase one, that's kind of neat. So I appreciate that. And then finally, the dial on this guy is beautiful. And that's kind of the second thing that's kind of unique about this guy, is this is using an aventurine dial. This is not a natural aventurine. This is it's homemade. Well, not homemade. It's factory made, but still, it's a very interesting dial. If you just look at a picture of it, it doesn't photograph well because it just looks like you've speckled it with paint. But in practice, it's got a lot of reflectivity to it. And in fact, that goes up as you add additional light. I've got a flashlight off the screen here, and I'm going to slowly increase the amount of light going at this guy. That's a lot of sparkling. And now I'm moving the light around, and you're going to just see how much sparklation goes on this watch. This is very... Whoa there. Sorry, that was me hitting the phone with my flashlight. That's serious business right there. It's not going to be to everybody's taste, but oh, wow. That's unusual. And so as a result, you've got this aventurine dial that can go from being relatively, in very dark situations, it almost appears black with little flecks. But then when you put full sunlight on this, it explodes in this festival of glitter, basically. Which is not a sentence I expected to say today, but I guess here we are, right? So it is a beautifully sparkly dial. And if that is your style, then by God, it's going to be interesting to you. So to me, all that's the good. Is that it's got this beautiful aventurine dial. The movement itself is very unusual with a micro rotor. I love the fact that they're using some iris, some sapphire, that it's very thin. Irish and sapphire. Irish is an interesting material, right? It's a very unassuming size, and it has a great deployant clasp on there as well. To me, the great part about this watch, though, is the price point. This is a Kickstarter, so like I said, but right now the price that they've got goes from $390 on the low end to $447 on the high end. It's going to be priced in euros, but that's the current conversion rate. That's an impressive price point. Honestly, that would be an impressive price point just with this dial, or just with this movement, but getting both of them at the same time, yeah, that's impressive. You're getting a very nice case. The case itself is sort of, in a lot of ways, a little bit unremarkable relative to the rest of the thing, but that's because the rest of the thing is pretty remarkable. You're getting a beautifully detailed movement on here. You're getting a fine clasp on here. You're getting the founder has talked a fair amount about the ways that he's been able to keep the cost down, but this is a surprisingly good bargain. This is damn near too good to be true sort of levels of bargain. So having a micro rotor movement at this kind of a price point is very, very impressive. That's cheaper than the Seiko Alpinist, and the movement on that is, shall we say, not the most impressively figured movement ever, although, and not the most accurate one either. So the movement here is very impressive at this kind of a price point. Actually, all elements of it are. On the bad side, a couple of things. The font on this has gotten a lot of heat. A lot of people have said that they don't care for it. Personally, I actually don't mind it at all. It adds a little bit, to me at least, of an aesthetic. It adds something a little bit less common, a little bit more, I don't know, Irishy or something like that. I don't know, but I kind of like it, but apparently a lot of folks don't, and they're considering changing some of the fonts around. Who knows what the final one's going to look like, but apparently I'm the only person who likes it, but I like it. Whatever, not a big deal. There is no lume on this guy, but it's a dress watch, so that's not a major shock there. It is non-hacking, like I said, but there aren't even second markers, so, take it with what it's worth. If you find being plus or minus a minute in your life, well, okay, plus or minus, there's an uncertainty interval here, we'll put it that way. The accuracy specs on this guy are not particularly amazing either. Like I said, this one was really well regulated and was absolutely dead on, and that hopefully means that it will keep a good regulation, which is maybe the most important thing, but plus 20, minus 20, not the most impressive, but at this price point, okay, whatever. 5 atmosphere water resistance here, that means you've got some water resistance, but it's not amazing. It's not like a dive watch, but it's also a dress watch. So whatever. Basically, you're okay in a rainstorm, but that's really about as far as I take it with 5 atmospheres. Next thing, hand winding this guy isn't super easy. You can do it. You can just turn the crown, but it definitely takes a little bit more force than I'm used to in a movement. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely something. I'm glad it's an automatic. We'll just put it that way. There's a thing there, and it's just because it's a tiny little crown, and it doesn't stick out very far. Next thing, the date window isn't doing it for me. Apparently, it's not doing it for the maker either, so in the final versions, the little date surround is going to disappear, but that's a thing. So it'll just be a date as a hole in the aventurine dial. I keep saying adventurine, like, oh, I'm going adventuring. But no, not that thing. Next thing, this is a brand new movement. At least in terms of production watches, we don't know how well it'll wear. We don't know how durable it'll be over the long term. We don't really know what Hangzhou is doing in terms of their movement mechanics. It's at a price where, okay, I mean, if it dies after a few years, that sucks, and you might be able to get it repaired. But that's the other big issue with it, is that finding a watchmaker to service this guy is going to be very difficult, because finding parts might not be possible. I don't know how different this movement is internally, and maybe a watchmaker could comment more specifically, and maybe Sólás could comment more specifically about how exactly the service is going to look for this new movement, but that's definitely a thing to consider here. You are taking a risk anytime that you buy a watch with a brand new movement from a relatively small company. That's something to consider there. Next thing, this is the very first watch I've ever had on my table where the dial is actually more easy to read in low light. Let me grab my, here we go. Grab my flashlight again. And what we see here is that in full sunlight, the indices actually, and hands even occasionally, have a tendency to just disappear. And so you kind of have to find the angle at which the indices stand out among all of the sparkles. So as a result, this is actually an easier to read watch indoors. Indoors, it's a little bit more under control. That aventurine really, it brings it. We'll just put it that way. And so as a result, having everything polished, having no lume pips or anything, no paint, means that this actually can be a little trickier to read in full sunlight, which is kind of unusual. Next thing, the strap on this isn't amazing. The reason it is what it is because this is made in Ireland. And that's something that was very important to the creator there. In practice, what this means is that this is a very dressy watch, and this strap is absolutely not. I can appreciate the theme to it, but I think for most people, the very first step in buying this watch is going to be putting it on a new strap, finding a new deployant strap to use it with. That's not a great thing, and I think for a lot of folks, this strap isn't going to cut it for the long term. And then finally on the bad side, and I'll talk a bit about more of this later, but it's a Kickstarter, so you always have to be careful. You always have to consider this a gamble. The guy, in my discussions with him, has come across as exceptionally motivated and earnest, and I don't see any cause for immediate concern. But remember, you're placing a bet, not buying a product, when you fund a Kickstarter, and this feels really good. In fact, it's borderline too good to be true. So do consider that risk in mind and realize that caveat emptor. I'm reviewing it because I think it's absolutely fascinating, but there is some risk here. So to me, at least, that's what's bad, is that it is a Kickstarter, so there's always that risk. The strap isn't amazing. It's the first dial I've ever had that's more readable in low light. It's a new movement. The date window isn't amazing, but that's going to get fixed. The hand winding isn't super easy. It's 5 atmospheres. Accuracy specs aren't great on paper, but this one was fine. It's non-hacking with no lume, and the font is, well, apparently really ugly to a lot of folks, but I like it. Whatever. On the ugly front, the only real ugly issue here, aside from a lot of people, according to the font there, is that it's a limited initial run. He explained that there are reasons for doing it that way that keep the prices down for that initial Kickstarter thing. And he seems to be open to future runs. But still, it bothers me when I see limited edition anywhere. And so that bugs me a little bit. Even seeing it in Irish gets my blood boiling a little bit. So, yeah, I definitely wish this weren't a limited edition. But, he gave good, compelling reasons for it. So, yeah, there we go. Anyways, on the final conclusion front, this is a very impressive watch relative to the price. It's got a nice clasp, a nice size, a nice crystal, some unique touches, a very interesting movement, a beautiful dial, and a price that is honestly really good. Like suspiciously, scarily good. It's good. The font is controversial, sure. The water resist is low. It's a little tough to hand wind with a questionable readability in direct light. A so-so strap, and it's a Kickstarter with a slightly limited initial run, that is. But more than anything, I'm very impressed. This is a piece with not just one source of wow. In many ways, just having this dial would be enough to impress. This is a very impressive dial with any kind of light on it. Like, wow, that's definitely a thing. But also, there's the movement, and that's also quite impressive. So this is a watch that is impressive on both sides. And both of those together is very impressive, and having all of that for that price is very, very cool. And this prompts maybe one more round of caveat emptor. I have absolutely no reason to believe that there's anything actually sketchy here. And in fact, I wouldn't have done this if I thought that there was, but at the same time, this price is borderline. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. This is a movement that hasn't been used before. The Kickstarter is definitely a thing, and this is a factory prototype. We don't know exactly what that final version is going to end up looking like, but I do hope this gets funded, and I really hope it turns out to be everything that this is, because this is really excellent. If the final product that ships is just like this is going to be amazing. And most importantly, and part of the reason that I did want to do this, despite the fact that it's not a full-blown model yet, is that it highlights that there are micro brands out there that are doing something unique. They're doing something interesting. It feels like a lot of micro brands are making another damn diver. Like, oh, wow, we made a Flieger watch. Amazing. Oh, wow. No, I don't care. The biggest differentiator for a lot of the micro brand watches is this one's got our brand logo on it. I don't care about that, but this is different. With the dial, it's different. With the movement, it's different. With the Ireland thing, it's different. This whole damn thing is very different and has resulted in a very interesting dress watch, a very audacious kind of thing, and something very, very cool. So no matter what happens, whether this thing sinks, swims, funds, doesn't fund, whatever, I applaud the audacity here. But ultimately, all I know is that this project is a thing, that this price is amazing, and if they are able to pull off what they are promising here, well, let's put it this way. They're shooting for the moon, so even if they miss a little bit, they're still going to land among the Starlight. Okay. Anyways, there you go. I hope this was interesting. And Sólás, look, keep up the good. Make it happen. Make this happen, and then make more stuff happen. Because I love the idea of different micro... Oh, I really hope so. So anyways, there you go. Hope this was interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.